Hi, guys. We're live. I'm Libby Emmons. I'm filling in for Tim Pool as he's out, and I'm happy to be with you for the second day of my time in the chair this week. It's really exciting. I wanted to just dive right in to a story that you guys might have seen. The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, is under investigation by the Department of Justice. The Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, has brought that case. And after that case was brought, Mayor Johnson was taking questions from reporters, and he took this rather stunning question. And I wanted to just start off by playing that for you guys, if we could.
Real Chicagoans woke up this morning relieved that the Department of Justice is finally investigating your race hustle. As someone who grew up on the south side of Chicago, I've heard a lot of race hustlers in my life, trust me. But they were usually marching around outside of City Hall, which is what makes this so embarrassing and dangerous. Very, very dangerous to the city of Chicago.
Okay, we need the question.
I'm more than happy to ask this question. It's long overdue. For over a year, real Chicagoans, white and black, have been telling me that your black power rhetoric is bringing the city backwards from a place that
we need the question.
Had overcome. You want the question?
Please.
Real Chicagoans want to know, why are you a racist?
Well, first of all, I reject the idea and the premise that somehow that's an actual legitimate question.
You want that?
All right, we're going to go to the next one. Alice?
The next question, my follow-up question is a businessman, Robert Gomez, had his riverfront restaurant license yanked. You said that the reason you hire black people is because they're the most generous race on the planet. His riverfront restaurant license was yanked and given to a black restaurateur. That has, once again, reinforced the belief among real Chicagoans,
okay,
white and black and Mexican,
question,
that you are a racist. What do you say to those people?
Again, I reject the premise that somehow that your question has any legitimacy. Thank you for your time, sir.
That's truly amazing. Why are you racist was the question, and Mayor Johnson refused to answer it. He questioned the legitimacy of the question at all. So we did some digging into this. Where's that story? Here we go. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson. I was looking at this morning. I was just fascinated. I was really interested in what was going on here. So what we see is that Mayor Johnson does not want to be called racist, even though repeatedly he has bragged about having specifically hired black people for key positions. And I just think this is incredible. Here we go. In April, that man that the reporter referenced, Mr. Gomez, who had a restaurant on the Riverwalk, spoke to local news about the revocation of his lease at that space. He had a restaurant called Beat Kitchen. He said it generated about $3 million annually, and he's had the restaurant under a 5-year lease and I guess that's a lease from the city directly, and he'd only been operating for 3 years after the first 2 years were taken up with delays. He applied for the lease again at the renewal point and competed against just one other applicant. He was not permitted to keep his restaurant open during the renewal period, which he said dragged on for months. So he applied to continue his lease to keep operating his restaurant, and he was told that he had to close it down while they were waiting to see who was going to get the lease. So that's jobs, that's revenue, and that's a shuttered restaurant in a place where you want a lot of foot traffic and where you want to have a vibrant part of your city. So he wasn't allowed to keep it open. The process, he said, dragged on for months, and the space remained closed for the entire 2023 season That's wild. Chicago took the lease from Gomez and gave it to someone else. Gomez told ABC he didn't know why he was passed over and his lease was revoked. He wasn't given any reason. He called out the lack of transparency of the lease award process, asked the city for a briefing. The city said that they would tell him about it, but only after they had taken his lease away, meaning that he had absolutely no recourse. And the evaluation committee for leases said the purpose of the RFP process, which is request for proposals, anyone who's applied for work with any government, what you do is the government agency, after all their stupid research, puts out a request for proposals with all of these guidelines. And that's where you're going to see not just what the intention of the project is, but you're also going to see all of your quotas about how many people and companies of different races you have to include, like your minority or women-owned business enterprises is what they were called in New York City. I'm sure Chicago has remarkably similar things, as well as laws about unions and all of this other stuff. So the purpose of the RFP process, said the selection committee, is to ensure that Chicagoans benefit from a competitive bidding process that takes into account a number of factors. Unfortunately, this applicant was not selected for a renewed concessions agreement based on the assessment by the evaluation committee. That doesn't give you any information as to why he was passed over after he was operating a successful business for a number of years. And this comes, Brandon Johnson's comments come after the Department of Justice is investigating the employment practices of the city of Chicago to determine whether it has engaged in a pattern or practice of racial discrimination in violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. So the DOJ, Harmeet Dillon, who you guys are probably familiar with, she's absolutely excellent and she's very involved in civil rights cases. And she said that his list of remarks, this is a letter that she sent to the mayor, include business and economic neighborhood development. The deputy mayor is a black woman. Department of Planning and Development is a black woman. Infrastructure deputy mayor is a black woman. Chief operations officer is a black man. Budget director is a black woman. Senior advisor is a black man. I think that's sort of wild that you could just list off all the races of the various people that you may have hired in your government. Governments are rather large. And I don't think that it's reasonable that the first things that come to mind are what race and gender your employees are. I know that when I think of the staff at the Post Millennial and Human Events, mostly what I think about is their talent, their hard work ethic, and their amiability, to be honest, because I like to work with people who are easy to work with. But that's what I think about. Considering these remarks, wrote Harmeet Dillon, I have authorized an investigation to determine whether the city of Chicago is engaged in a pattern or practice of discrimination as set forth above. If these kind of hiring decisions are being made for top-level positions in your administration, then it begs the question whether such decisions are also being made for lower-level positions. And it also begs the question that this reporter brought up, which is, Mayor Johnson, why are you racist? So I don't think that reporter's going to get the answer to that question. I don't think we're going to get the answer to that question, but I do have faith that Harmeet Dillon is going to dig in and find out if perhaps not why the mayor is racist, uncovering perhaps that he is racist in a formal way. So we'll definitely keep our eyes on that. And I applaud the temerity of that reporter who continued with his follow-up question even after aides tried to shut him up. So well done. Well done, Mr. Reporter in Chicago. Another thing that was interesting today is the black governor of Maryland vetoed a bill on reparations. This was passed by the legislature. They wanted more money for what, like another committee to determine about reparations. And Maryland Governor Wes Moore said, I strongly believe now is not the time for another study. Now is the time for continued action that delivers results for the people we serve. So we saw recently that you had members of Congress, Ayanna Pressley is the one who jumps to mind because she was very vocal about it, trying to bring another reparations bill to the floor of the House and say, you know, that all this tax money should be used for reparations, cash or otherwise, for Black Americans. And California has passed some stuff like this, and some different states around the country have done various studies to determine how eligibility would be determined for constituents who may or may not be able to obtain these reparations payments. But let's take a look at this. What he said was, I applaud the legislature's work on this bill, and I thank the Black Caucus for their leadership. Maryland is proud to be a state with the largest Black caucus in America, our first Black attorney general, our first Black senator, a Black treasurer, and a Black speaker of the House. So he's got a similar thing to Brandon Johnson here. He can list it all. We have moved in partnership with leaders across the state to uplift Black families and address racial disparities in our communities. That is the context in which I've made this difficult decision, because while I appreciate the work that went into this legislation, I strongly believe now is not the time for another study. Now is the time for continued action that delivers results for the people we serve. The bill would have authorized the Maryland Reparations Commission to be established and would study and make recommendations relating to appropriate 21 benefits to be offered to individuals impacted by historical inequality. So I think that's kind of interesting. What does it say about the future of reparations in this country if a state with a large Black population headed by a Black governor, Democrat governor, is opposed to more reparations, more of this kind of inquiry? I think that perhaps the whole push for reparations right now in 2024 is not meeting the needs of the Democratic Party at this point. I think that's what mostly this is about. It's not because they think that it's not justified as a concept. Probably they do. The Democrats probably do think it's a justified concept, but I think that Democrats are pulling back a little bit on this issue, at least for Wes Moore, because it's not resonating with voters, right? You have a lot of voters out there still having trouble with their bills, housing payment, all of the other stuff that goes into just paying for your life, because paying for life is super expensive and difficult. And people don't want to think about what should happen to all of their tax dollars that is not going to fixing roads and fixing schools and doing all of the things that people need in order to further their own lives and their children's lives. So Moore wrote that the state has launched several commissions and study groups to examine the legacy of slavery in our state over the last 25 years, saying that we are grateful for the Marylanders who have contributed their expertise to the vital project of understanding how the legacy of slavery continues to impact Black communities in our state. I will always protect and defend the full history of African Americans in our state and country, but in light of the many important studies that have taken place on the issue over nearly 3 decades, so that's a ton of money that's gone into commissions to figure it out. So that money wasn't even spent on reparations. It was just spent on studies about reparations. So you can imagine that the people that the reparations committees were brought together to figure out how to help didn't even get any help from those committees. So that's ridiculous. And Wes Moore, I think, did the right thing in vetoing that bill. And you can see that he published that, his letter on that as well. Black faith leaders supported Moore's veto, echoing his sentiment that there have been enough studies and now is the time to take action. While important work went into this legislation, now is not the time for another study. Now is the time for continued action that delivers results. So I don't think that means that they're going to issue reparations. I think it means that they're going to work for all Marylanders, and I hope that's true. Because dividing up tax dollars to help people based on race under the guise of righting past discrimination by creating current discrimination is, I think, not really constitutional. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. We also have another leader who, this is the mayor of Newark, Ross Baraka, who compared ICE to slaveholders during an April campaign stop. This video was from the New York Post, and I'd like to just play that. He gets big laughs, so I think he also might have a career in comedy.
Can relate to that because we was undocumented too. Well, I don't want y'all to be confused. Black folks, you come from a whole line of undocumented people. And if they didn't chasing, catching you. It wasn't called ICE then. Right? Yeah? Oh, you got a little relationship to that. Yeah, we know what that means and what that feels like. In fact, the 14th Amendment exists because you was being chased. Because you was undocumented. Because your citizenship was in question. Can relate to that.
And I wanted to take a look a little closer at Ras Baraka. He was arrested by, let's see, when was he arrested? May 9th. He was out there at Delaney Hall in Newark protesting the ICE facility that's holding illegal immigrants. He was one of, I think, 4 lawmakers who were out there. You also had Reps LaMonica McIver, Bonnie Watson Coleman, and Rob Menendez. LaMonica McIver is, of course, facing felony charges for her actions. Alina Habba, the U.S. Attorney for New Jersey, said that she was basically assaulting ICE officers. There's body cam footage that backs it up. What's really funny in that body cam footage is that McIver is wearing a red blazer, and she's the only one not in earth tones. So, like, no matter what the angle of the body cam, it's super easy to spot her in the crowd. You can see her arms going. You can see all of it because everyone else is wearing, like, army green, and she's out there dressed like a poppy. I get it. You know, you want to spark a color, but it's easy to see her out there on the video. So this video of Mayor Ras Baraka was an exclusive to the New York Post, and he was out there at a campaign stop. He's running for governor of New Jersey, and apparently his campaign is not doing amazing. But I thought this was interesting in part because of what he said. I mean, now, first of all, is ICE comparable to slave catchers under, what was it, the 1850 Fugitive Slave Act? I don't think so. It's a totally different circumstance. The 14th Amendment was designed to make sure that the children of enslaved people actually had rights to full citizenship, which obviously, like, they should. They should never have been enslaved people. Obviously, we all know that. But anyways, so what you have here is Baraka saying that he wasn't the one to draw the connection between ICE and slavery, but the Trump administration when it attacked birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. I think that's a bit of a stretch because that's just where birthright citizenship is in the Constitution. But a funny thing about Ras Baraka that I think you probably don't know is that his father was Amiri Baraka, who was a famed Black nationalist, poet, and dramatist who won an Obie for his play Dutchman that premiered off-Broadway, I think at the Cherry Lane in 1964. And Amiri Baraka, who was born Leroy Jones, had actually married this woman, Hetty Cohen, this white lady from Queens, white Jewish lady from Queens. And after the assassination of Malcolm X, Leroy Jones changed his name to Amiri Baraka, decided it was no longer cool to be married to a white Jewish lady, abandoned her and their 2 kids in Newark, New Jersey, meaning she had to give up her whole career. She was also, of course, like a writer and, very beatnik and whatever else was going on at the time. She ended up becoming an education activist in Jersey just to make sure that her kids, 2 daughters, got a proper education. Meanwhile, Amiri Baraka took off for Harlem, married a woman named Sylvia Robinson, who changed her name to Amina Baraka and then was the co-founder of Sugar Hill Records. And then Ras Baraka was featured on Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill in 1998. So he's super oppressed. He's actually just a far left culture Nepo baby. And that's probably why he's got such good chops for the comic timing. Grew up in that whole scene. I think that's fascinating because he grew up with this oppressor victim morality spoon-fed to him his whole life, and here he is continuing with that. He probably never even questioned it. Yesterday, Donald Trump, amid everything with Joe Biden, came out and defended what he called the cognitively impaired Joe Biden, accusing Democrats of taking advantage of him and the auto pen, which is really important because, of course, Donald Trump is questioning the pardons that Biden's team signed with this auto pen. So an auto pen An auto pen is like a machine where you put in a card that has a signature on it, and then an actual pen in the machine will sign a paper with that signature on it. So whoever has the card has the keys to the kingdom. And we can just take a look at what Trump said. Let's open this up. This is, of course, more reporting from the Post Millennial, your favorite publication and mine. Donald Trump said Joe Biden was not for open borders. He never talked about open borders where criminals of all kinds, shapes, and sizes can flow into our country at will. Trump is defending another president. There aren't that many presidents left. What do you got? You got Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden. That's pretty much it, right? Because Carter recently passed. He said that it wasn't his idea. It wasn't Biden's idea to open the border and almost destroy the country and cost us billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars to get criminals out of our country and go through the process we're going in now. It was the people that knew he was cognitively impaired and that took over the auto pen. They stole the presidency of the United States and put us in great danger. This is treason at the highest level, Trump alleges. They did it to destroy our country. The Joe Biden that everybody knew would never allow drug dealers, gang members, and the mentally insane to come into our country totally unchecked and unvetted. And that probably makes sense because Joe Biden was a big proponent of, like locking up black drug dealers, right? Am I remembering that correctly? That was before I really paid a lot of attention to politics, but I'm pretty sure that happened. I wonder why Trump is defending the president. I think the former president. I think part of why he's doing that is that he does respect the office of the presidency. And I don't think he likes to see one of his very, very elite small group of men be taken down like this. Also, we saw that Joe Biden, after the cancer diagnosis, he hasn't talked to anybody. He's been basically like hiding out. And a lot of his friends in Congress are wondering where he is and are sending him private notes, apparently. Meanwhile, you have Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson doing the whole circuit for their new Original Sin book and going all in on bashing Biden and bashing the Democrats because that's kind of where the money is now.